p.m. Today we're doing it at 9:30 a.m. I want to welcome the members of the Senate Rules Committee. Let's establish a quorum. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Canella? Here. Canella here. Leyva? Leyva here. Mitchell? Here. Mitchell here. Fuller? DeLeon?
Here.
DeLeon here.
Fantastic. We've established a quorum. Let's go to file item number 1. If I can get a motion, please. We have a motion by Ms. Mitchell. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senators Canella? Aye. Canella, aye. Leyva? Leyva, aye. Mitchell? Aye. Mitchell, aye. Fuller? DeLeon?
Aye.
DeLeon, aye.
Okay, as 4-0 votes, we will keep it open, so Ms. Fuller may add her votes. Let's go to file item number 2. We have 2 governor appointees with us that are required to appear. Let's bring up file item number 2A. That is Mr. Awat Kindane. Mr. Kindane, good morning. Good morning. Now, you were up for Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. So if there's anyone that you'd like to introduce, please do so, and please begin with a statement as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have with me my family, my grandmother. 20, are you 21 or 22, grandmother?
Mr. Kindane, I think she's old enough to discipline you before the Rules Committee.
Absolutely. My 91. My mother, my father, and my beautiful wife.
Your father, where's your father?
Curtis.
Oh, I did not know he was your father all this time.
Yes.
All this time, I did not know this.
Yes.
Oh my God, you guys have played it really well for all these years. Welcome, nonetheless.
Thank you. I also, if could, acknowledge my staff, hardworking, and put up with me often days, so I want to thank them and appreciate them. Mr. Chairman, Senators, good morning. My name is Awat Kindane, and thank you very much for considering confirmation of my appointment as Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. I bring to this position over 10 years of experience legislatively and administrative experience. Additionally, I grew up in a house where my mother was a teacher for her entire career, my father, an advocate for people who are disadvantaged, and a public service his entire career. I experienced firsthand what it meant to tirelessly pursue excellence and constantly challenge the norms. That is the spirit and the culture I intend to instill within my department. Prior to my appointment, Senators, I served as Chief Deputy Director for the department for 2.5 years. Prior to service with the administration, I served as Chief of Staff to Assemblymember Stephen Bradford and Senior Assistant to Assembly Speaker Karen Bass. Those experiences and my background have given me a tremendous knowledge of the Department of Consumer Affairs. I bring quite a bit of knowledge, both policy and implementation, enough to make me a effective and dynamic director. Mr. Chairman and Senators, I have a lot of work to do in this department, and I look forward to working with this legislature, consumer advocates, the governor's office, and stakeholders in getting the job done and aggressively protecting the consumers of this great state. Again, I thank this body for considering my confirmation, and I look forward to questions this body may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kindane, and thank you very much for presenting your family as well this morning. And thank you for your presentation as well. Let's start off with a couple points with regards to something that you inherited, obviously, prior to your stewardship at the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I think you know what I'm talking about with regards to the Breeze contract, which was something that was inherited and it was initiated back, I think, in 2000, if I'm correct. 11 or 9, in the previous administration.
Yes.
With then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Obviously, there's been some major flaws with the programming and a whole variety of issues with regards to money. It's something that seems like you're stuck with. Why don't you give us what is happening legally? If there's any litigation, I don't know if there is or not, with regards to Accenture, what the price tag was initially and what the price tag is projected to be.
Mr. Pro Tem, thank you for that question. That was a very, very good distillation of the issues that my staff and I experienced.
Distillation, wait, let me get a dictionary real quick, please. Okay, distillation. No GRE words here.
2009, that's when because of Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative, CPEI, the BREEZE project was the technology component of that initiative. The spirit of it was to essentially standardize the data, enforcement, licensing all across my constituent boards and bureaus. The problem in that was there was not enough analytics that went into how we as DCA does business. Before they went into engaging the contract, what should have happened, senators, is a very, very holistic look at, okay, we license, we enforce. That's true. How do we do that? The practice acts are all different. Licensing, enforcement is a little similar, but licensing is completely different, board by board, bureau by bureau, and there were far too many assumptions made. Those assumptions, unfortunately, were baked into the contract with requirements that were too high level. That essentially was the keystone to a lot of the problems that followed. A price tag that was woefully underbid. The original bid, about $27 million, made assumptions that the state would be able to do a lot of the things, essentially taking on risk. It then went to $47 million after the contract was awarded. After the state started getting its hands around some of the problems, you started seeing special project reports that went before some of your committees, budget, as well as business and professions, both Senate and Assembly. That's when the state really started saying, okay, we have a problem. The requirements that are baked into the very contract that I spoke of clearly do not meet the needs of the subscribing boards and bureaus. How do we fix it? That's when the cost started running up, Mr. Pro Tem. We had to delay the project. We had to essentially buy more requirements.
And to be very clear about this, when you say baked into the contract, again, this is baked into the contract in the previous administration.
That's correct, sir.
I just want to be very clear. Okay.
Absolutely. So that, to answer your question, that's kind of where it started and how the original problem started. Solving the problem, it required a lot of thought and analytics. There were three choices that we had, sir. We had to think about cutting the contract off in the middle of the testing phase of release run, pausing, or continuing and amending the contract at a more advantageous time. We chose the latter because of the less financial liability to the state.
So what is the projected cost today?
The cost of the entire project to conclusion is $95.6 million,
And
$96 million rounding up.
all right, and who will bear those costs?
The cost will be spread over the subscribing boards and bureaus for the design contract and the entire project, the boards and bureaus that are subscribing to it.
And how many boards? So you cut those boards in half, right?
18.
18 boards from originally from 37 to 36.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So each board, so we can understand, each board is dipping into their own pot. They're pointing up to put it into the bigger pot.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, because I know there's been attempts to come to these subcommittees, if you will. I'm assuming on both sides of the chambers, and given that this is sort of a recurring theme on a whole variety of issues with regards to the limited amount of surplus or discretionary dollars in the general fund side to deal with important projects and investments in human capital, that there's limited to no dollars at all whatsoever to be invested in these projects. Therefore, you have to eat the cost.
Correct. You know, the costs are being paid for by the subscribing boards and bureaus. They're using the system. The system was meant for the boards and bureaus to essentially do business. It's updating an antiquated system that's been there for 30 years. So they are essentially paying for it, similar to how they're paying for the legacy system that was in place before.
To the best of your knowledge, and predates you, when the rules staff and several members of the rules committee digged in a little deeper, I don't want to say forensically, but digged in a little deeper with regards to the original contract itself and how it was baked in the language itself. Sure. There were provisions that were removed that would have protected the state of California and therefore the taxpayers of California. And to the best of your knowledge, what knowledge do you have with regards to the DGS lawyers? I don't know if they're with us today, I don't know if they're gone, but remove the protections in the contract that would have protected the taxpayer of California.
I have very intimate knowledge of that process and the individuals that were involved at that time.
Can you expound a little more?
Absolutely. The process that was used at the time, Mr. Pro Tem, was the bidders challenged the requirements that were requested by the state, and it's a process that was in place pursuant to statute, and also I believe a contracting manual that DGS has. I believe, I'll check on that. The important thing to note is when the vendor challenged some of the requirements and some of that language, lawyers from DGS, lawyers from Department of Technology, then Office of Administrative Services, I believe, and some of my attorneys from DCA were part of that conversation. The executive team at DCA at the time and executives at DGS were present and were part of the decision making.
To remove the language that would have protected the state.
That is correct.
And the reasons, to your knowledge, is because of negotiations taking place by the bidders, by the vendors themselves, that found the language to not be conducive to their business model, to their projected contractual obligations?
What I gleaned from my research, Mr. Pro Tem, is...
And be mindful of one thing, I'm not pinning it on you, I'm just trying for you to extrapolate it
absolutely
as much as possible.
And I appreciate that. What I gleaned from my research is it was a very thoughtful process, and there was analytics that were done to the risk. What is the risk of removing these provisions? What is the risk of losing the contractor? And a decision was made at the time that the risk was much greater of losing the contractor than keeping the language, those provisions that we're speaking of, into the requirements.
Okay, I'm going to ask, I have a request of you, Mr. Kidane, that irrespective of today's decision, that you forward the names of the folks in DGS as well as DCA, whether they're currently employed or not employed with the administration, who handle the contractual negotiations in removing those specific provisions that would have protected the state of California.
So I'm absolutely. So I'm clear on your request, Mr. Pro Tem. The decision makers at each entity provide this body the names of those individuals.
That is correct. They were intimately involved and knowledgeable about this, right?
Very good.
Okay. I'm going to open up to questions for right now. Why don't we start right here with Ms. Leyva?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Good morning, Mr. Kidani.
Good morning,
It's nice
Senator.
to see you again. Enjoyed meeting with you.
As did I.
We too spent a little time on the BREEZE program and a little more in-depth today, so I thank you for those answers. I won't
Absolutely.
ask anything else. I had a question about an immigration issue that came up recently. One of the departments has been involved in some ICE issues, and it's been noted on TV. And just wondering how you feel about that, and if you think that that's something that the department should get involved with federal immigration laws.
The Department of Consumer Affairs does not enforce immigration, nor do we care to. We have a clear mandate set forth in the various practice acts that govern my boards and bureaus, and the provisions that govern me and set forth my mandate as a director. So I'm very clear on my mandate and what the Department of Consumer Affairs and its constituent regulating bodies do. Senator, having said that, there are times where we are compelled by federal statute and state statute to work with various federal entities, Secret Service, FBI, et cetera, given various cases, human trafficking, counterfeiting, et cetera. So those times do pop up, but we are definitely not in the business of immigration control.
Very good, thank you. I agree with what you said, and there are things that we have to do. I'm glad to hear, though, that that's not a top priority for you.
Thank you.
Another thing we talked about was private post-secondary education, and
Yes.
with a recent school, just another one tumbling. How do we make sure that our students who go to these for-profit schools receive an education that they can then go out into the world and actually find a job that pays the bills?
I think that's something, it's one of my biggest priorities, given these students pay a lot of money to these schools and invest a lot of time, oftentimes taking out valuable time out of their life, you know, babysitters, night school, et cetera. That is why I look forward to working with this body. We had a good working relationship the past few years with Senate Bill 1247, giving the Bureau more protections, more agility to provide that aggressive protection. School closures are exactly why my Bureau has what I call, excuse the informality, strike teams. We send staff out to every single campus when a school closes. We keep these schools on watch lists when we see that they're financially on the bubble. All of that is with the consumer or the students in mind. We know once those doors close, they don't have transcripts. That time is lost. The Bureau within its jurisdiction is working with these students on teach-outs. We have a student tuition recovery fund, which essentially pays the student on any out-of-pocket expenses. So there are different tools that are used to make these students whole and educate them just as importantly.
That's great. That sounds great. Thank you very much. Let me know how myself or our office can help in any way with that.
Thank you.
I think you'll do a great job. Glad to have you on board.
Thank you, Senator.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leyva. Madam Vice Chair.
Well, I've known you for a long time, and I've been very appreciative of your work in the past.
Thank you.
But at this point, I want to review that in 2012 to 2014, you were Chief Deputy Director for the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Yes.
And as Chief Deputy Director, you would have been expected to have been involved with the contract negotiations to some point.
Yes.
And at any time, was there a possibility that you could have influenced the decision not to take the contract protections from for the taxpayers out, or have any written record, or what was your role?
Well, when I was appointed Chief Deputy and then subsequently assigned executive sponsor of the project, unfortunately, Senator, those those boilerplate languages that we're speaking of was already out. One of my first tasks was to essentially write the contractual and project ship. I had read the contracts, figure out what's normal. At the time, I didn't know what a normal state contract was, so I had to go to some of my colleagues at Fiscal and other projects to see what a boilerplate state contract looks like and what's missing. I contacted Department of Technology. They were very aggressive in their assistance to me, and we had to, through milestones, slowly write the ship through amendments and prioritization of what the needs of the boards and bureaus and the department were.
Seems like then your subsequent year as a director, I know we visited off and on about other things, but also about how that was going. There was a great deal of optimism that this problem could be rectified, as I remember.
Absolutely.
So now I just have a great deal of concern. You had 2 years as a deputy to see how it all worked. There was a problem that emerged during that time, and I realized that you couldn't have full responsibility at that time, but certainly I would think that you would have had questions, being the upright person that you are. Then you had a year as the director to bring those public or work on those or to write those. So my questions today are all sort of around that, but for example, in February, your department reported information on all the boards and commissions' fund conditions, as you should have, that showed that the impact of the development of the BREEZE system on all of the DCA special funds and what those were. And according to this report, 18 of the funds were projected to have less than 3 months reserve in the fiscal year 2016-2017, which is typically when boards start to consider seeking fee increases. So how many of your boards are considering or planning to seek fee increases to shore up the projected funding shortfalls next year due to the cost of BREEZE?
None of the boards that are seeking fee increases, which is around five or six, are seeking it solely because of BREEZE. Candidly, BREEZE is a contributor, and it is an impact, and it was made worse by severing the contractual relationship with the third phase, so you have less boards to spread the cost over. But having said that, BREEZE is not a sole contributor to the pursuit of fee increases. To give context, Mr. Chairman and Senator, there would have been more seeking fee increases if I did not amend that contract and sever that contractual relationship. I had no contractual mechanism to slow the contract down and build in cost containment and quality containment. So the other issues that are contributing to the fee increases, structural imbalance, the cost of enforcement, the cost of consumer protection, and acquisition of staff. BREEZE is a contributor to that.
So what do you estimate the fee increases percentage to possibly be? What range?
It's hard to say because they're going through a fee audit right now. The boards that are seeking fees are going through a fee audit to figure out how much does it cost to do business and how much are we going to need. Currently, BREEZE is only a percentage of their expenditures, and if you were to draw a comparison to what they will need, it will probably be that same percentage of whatever they're acquiring from a new fee increase. It's not going to be all because of BREEZE, and if it's a $5 increase, it won't be all going to BREEZE. It will be the same percentage, I suspect, that goes to that fee, similar to what BREEZE is to that fund condition.
So if efforts to seek funding through the budget were not successful or could not be successful, then generally the amount that we've sort of seen going through some of those requests would cause a very large increase in some of these departments. And so I guess I'm just interested in, like, you were there 2 years as an assistant. You may not have had all the information, but you had a chance to be very familiar with how the system was working or not working. Then you took over as director. You had an opportunity to make the problem public and stop it. And now we're at a state where we still haven't been able to adequately control for the problem, nor are we aware of what the potential overarching financial impact will be and how we will deal with that. And that's important information for me to be sure that we are able to contain this in a cost-effective way. But I appreciate the pro tems asking for the names of the folks that didn't ask for the protection, because perhaps he can get to the bottom of that for us. But I would appreciate some report on what the financial impact would be to the fee payer that could actually clean this up and move us on. My experience in working with very, very large software contractors is that all along the way, there's negotiation parts with them to fix the problem and or to roll back some of the costs. And so I'm not sure if you're adequately pursuing those just because I have a lack of information. So I'll go to the next two questions and maybe you can bring that out. Between December 2010 and September 2014, the Caltech consultant and the IPO specialist raised nearly 180 significant concerns relating to the project management, staffing, system requirements, and vendor performance. As the project sponsor, how did you and your team address each of these concerns raised by the Caltech reports?
We work very closely with Caltech on mitigating solutions. Where the department failed was to properly memorialize those fixes in a document. We should have tightened up our document retention. We should have written things down as formal responses to that very document. During that time period, we were in close consultation with Caltech, and going back to your previous point, we were working with Caltech on all options. Should we cancel the project in the middle of release 1 before we even went live? Should we pause? Should we employ certain provisions in the contract that protects the state? All counsel advised me during that time period that the state's best interests were to, and the financial interests of the boards and bureaus were to release 1 and quickly amend out the third phase so we can better plan, knowing that the planning was insufficient in the first place. So to your point, I was very active, even as chief deputy. Once, as I uncovered more and more information, I was very active. I was having conversations with the legislature in budget committees and Senate BNP. I informed these bodies that I was seeking amendments to better the maintenance contract, to better the design contract, because there were so many problems.
A lot, that's a big job.
Absolutely.
When your predecessor, Mrs. Brown, was before this committee in mid-2012, she said that the Breeze system was in the testing phase where we can anticipate the types of problems we will have and correct them before we fully deploy. Now, I don't expect you to support or not support her. I just want to say that that was the last piece of evidence we had, and that was our expectation. So in the next question, feel free to elaborate on it from your viewpoint. But that statement was over a year before the rollout of Release 1 in October 2013. As the project sponsor, why did you move forward with the deployment of the Breeze when there were still 1,000 defects unresolved at the end of the testing phase 1?
Because of the very contract that we're talking about, the vendor met all of the contractual requirements. I had no contractual way of saying we can't go live. The only mechanism I had in place was to use the maintenance contract that I had to build in more bandwidth and fix those very problems that were plaguing the boards in Release 1.
Was there any attempt to partition the software to certain departments or certain functions that might have been working with less defects identified?
That's not possible given how the boards are very unique in how they do business. So we could not say this functionality goes to these two boards, this goes to, they all have their own practice
Yeah,
act.
you couldn't have said this particular, was there any board who had a part of the software that didn't have defects listed?
I think all of the boards struggled in Release 1. The important thing to note, though, is we have a functioning system, Senator. We've processed $160 million worth of business for consumers and licensees. The bugs, the defects, we're getting through that. We're processing them. The boards are prioritizing the fixes, and we're fixing these fixes every 6 weeks, which is a major milestone from where we were a year and a half ago.
Thank you. Helps us understand. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Cannella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we start, I want to introduce, I've got a young lady that's joining me today. She's part of this California Youth Connection, and so she's shadowing our office there. Her name is Jordan. She lives in my hometown, goes to Central Valley High School, and next year she'll be attending Stanislaus State. So, Jordan, welcome to our meeting here. And Mr. Kidani, we've had a nice discussion, and, you know, we just seem to bungle computer programs in the state of California. I can't think of, I'm sure there have some that have been successful, but it sure doesn't seem like it, and it certainly was before your watch. But I do want to just clarify, you mentioned during the bidding process the contract language was out, but I think one of the problems we made is there was one bidder. We were working with like a sole source contract. So if we had that, isn't that what you told me, that there was one contractor that was
It
bidding?
was at the end. It wasn't a sole source. At the end, there was one bidder that prevailed because of the other two were disqualified. So at the end of the process, there was one bidder.
When was the contract language taken out? Was it with the one bidder that was left, or was it during the process?
It was in 2010, late summer 2010.
So was that when there was down to one bidder, or was it when there was several firms?
Shortly after that, it was down to one bidder.
Okay, so I'm still accurate, though. You were
Correct.
dealing with one contractor, and they said remove the language. And again, you weren't in charge of this, but I wonder during the risk analysis if it was determined that it was a $80 million risk because that's really what we paid more, right? It was a $26 million contract, now it's
Right.
96 or $70 million. So I just think we've got to get better in the state of California when we're putting out computer programs. So that said, we are where we are, and we've got to just try to salvage the program, and I'm confident that you can do that. I appreciate your energy, and quite frankly, I appreciate you willing to take this on, because I can't believe at the end of the day we're going to look back and say, wow, this was a big success, right? And so hopefully we can salvage it to where we're not angry about it all the time, but I appreciate your willingness to take it on. And I will just say, I'm a licensed civil engineer, and every 2 years I have to renew my license, and this year was quite easy. I went to the website, and I don't know if that's part of the breeze or not, but it was really the easiest it's ever been for me. So
That's good.
Hopefully I breezed through, yes. It was very easy. So lots of problems. We talked about it. I don't want to keep, discussing them, but you've got a lot of work to do. You've got a lot of work to do to kind of turn the reputation. Also, I talked to Assemblywoman Olson. She was really on the breeze when it came to the registered nurses, and she had nothing but positive things to say about you. She said that you've worked very hard. You've been very responsive to her and her requests. So hopefully we get through this, and then you continue doing your work, and let's turn this around. So.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannella. We have our last senator today, last but not least, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, sir. And pardon me if I get on my soapbox a minute following Mr. Cannella's point about the state of California and local government, period, attempting to negotiate contracts on computer systems and building systems. We fail repeatedly. Before this committee, we've heard confirmations from Director of EDD, DMV, Office of Technology, and the bane of their existence have been their effort to build systems. And I think everyone has some skin in the game. The legislature, we fall short because we're trying to narrow costs. We have no idea whether the $27 million was reasonable in terms of the initial allocation or not. And so while we're responding kind of viscerally to the $95 million, maybe the thing really cost $95 million from Jump Street, and that's not what we were told. So the legislature doesn't have experience or counsel in this area. DGS clearly just got out-negotiated. And so we're not equipped. We're not equipped with attorneys who understand this new emerging field of lawn technology. You can't apply a typical state boilerplate language contract to these systems that you're trying to build. So until the state decides that we are going to invest in internal knowledge that will advise the legislature, that will make sure that contracts are written to protect the residents of the state of California, we will continue to have failure after failure after failure. Government has to get with the program and recognize that technology is ahead of us, and if we want to use it to make government more efficient, then we have to build our own skills in terms of knowledge and understanding and reality-based costs about what technology costs. We're always trying to skimp and junk in, junk out. And then we end up paying larger costs at the end, but we don't really know. The system may have cost $95 million from the beginning. The second piece I'll say is companies that have continued to fail by providing us with junk need to never get another state contract again. Why do we keep going down the same road? It's about 5 companies who continue to screw California, counties, school boards, municipalities over, and we have made them billionaires at taxpayer expense. I would be cool with that if we've got products as a result that work, but we don't. And like you said, I can't point to one. The court system isn't working. LA counties tried to have systems and CalWorks that have worked. I can't, EDD, DMV, I can't point to one that's worked. I appreciate that building systems, the magnitude of what California needs, takes a unique skill set, but we can't continue to go to the same companies who fall short. You know, what's the expression? You fool me once, second time, I'm crazy. I don't know what the expression is. But you get my point. You get my point. And for the record, DGS needs to get it. Department of Technology needs to get it. We need to get it. We cannot continue to award contracts to companies who fail. That doesn't make good sense on our part. And we as a legislature whose job it is to protect public investment, it's going to ultimately be our responsibility to attempt to explain it to taxpayers why we keep making the same mistake.
Well, we think it should be the executive branch's responsibility ultimately.
Well, I think it's all of us,
But
because
it
the
becomes
executive
the
branch is coming to
because
coming
it
to
becomes
us.
the legislature.
Right. The executive, everybody's got skin in the game. The executive branch is coming to us to allocate, the money to fix it after the fact. We're paying for it on the front end. And so everybody's got to. And, you know, good luck finding the culprits of the people, but the bottom line is DGS attorneys got out-negotiated, so we need attorneys in DGS that have experience and are savvy in negotiating technology contracts, so it won't continue to happen.